program planning committees. I want to introduce to you today Ryan Gove, who's the Director of Student Life. Ryan is committed to diversity and inclusion initiatives. With the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Ryan spearheads DEI initiatives at KUMC like Safe Zone Training, Thrive Food Pantry, PRISM, and is an active member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Cabinet and Committees. Please welcome Ryan Gove.
Hello, everyone. Happy Pride. We are halfway through June and fully celebrating. Really excited to be your moderator today for today's panel of amazing KUMC colleagues who are going to be sharing their stories. So what I'd like to do first is have everyone go ahead, have our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. So I'm just going to look around the screen and we'll start with Sarah. Sarah, do you want to say hello?
I will say hello if I can figure out how to unmute. It's not like I spend all day in Zoom or anything.
You're good.
So I'm Sarah Dahlstrom. I work in the Department of Biostatistics and Data Science as an academic program specialist. Am I supposed to say anything else as I introduce myself?
Why don't we, panelists, why don't you share how you identify as part of the community?
Excellent. I identify as lesbian, pronouns she, her. Yeah, and I never talk about being gay or identifying as a lesbian. And so I'm terribly nervous and am very excited at the same time.
We're glad you're here. Thank you so much. How about Zach?
Hi, I'm Zach. I'm a fourth year medical student. I'm on the Wichita campus. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a gay man, so.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, friend. Ryan, spelled R-H-Y-A-N.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Ryan Kubik and I am a clinical researcher for the Radiation Oncology Department. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a proud bisexual woman.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Martin, do you want to go next?
Sure. Martin Anderson. I'm talking to you from Peace River, Alberta, which is in the northern part of Canada. I am just finishing my OTD, just finished my OTD through the Occupational Therapy Department. I identify as a queer fellow bisexual, and I, what pronouns? Usually he, him.
Awesome. Thanks for making our call international today. That's always exciting. And last but not least, Dr. Tori Gleason.
Hi, I'm Tori Gleason. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an MPH student at KU School of Medicine, Wichita campus. I'm trans and I'm queer as frick, so.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking some time with me to have already shared your stories. And what we're gonna do is really weave those stories together today and learn more about some of the most amazing people in our community. So we'll have people chat. I'll be asking them some questions. Please feel free to throw questions in the chat. And at the end, the last 15, 20 minutes or so, we will have about, we'll have some time for general questions for all of our panelists as well. So please feel free to jump in as they're telling their stories and ask some things. And I'll be asking some questions along the way. But we're gonna start with Ryan. How are you today?
I am so good. How are you,
I'm
Ryan?
I know. It's always fun to talk to another Ryan. Where do you want to start with your story?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I feel like, your story starts when you realize that that's the community that you're a part of, and then you kind of work backwards a little bit, and then you get to start working forwards. So I know that you and I kind of dove into it the other day. So where do you think we should start?
When did you come out?
I came out 3.5 years ago, to myself first, and then immediately to everybody around me.
Talk a little bit about that. Why do you say you came out to yourself first and then everyone else? How is that different?
Something that I think that I wish that people understood and that I hope gets to be different for the generations moving forward is that when you're a queer person or you're a part of the LGBT plus community, you kind of have to discover who you are, because the world that you grow up in isn't one where it's normalized to be a woman who likes women or a man who likes men or someone who doesn't identify as, either of those genders. And so that fluidity isn't made super apparent to you. So it's kind of a process of discovery first. For me, I had a moment with one of my best friends who was having a really bad day and wanted me to come say hello to her. And I was like driving over and my palms were sweaty and my heart was racing. And I realized that I had a massive crush on one of my best friends who is a woman. And that was a really eye-opening experience for me to, discover that that was a piece of myself. And then I had to sit with, how long I had been ignoring that for, and how long like the rest of my community had let that be something that, was ignored. So coming out to myself was definitely that first step for me.
What did you see when you looked back? Did anything jump out like, oh?
Yeah, I had a lot of Kim Possible posters. And I had a best friend that I spent more nights a week with than I did in my own bed by myself. And there was definitely, it's one of those moments where you look back and you're like, oh, that was probably my first girlfriend, but neither of us really knew to call it that. She now is also out as a queer person. And so, and the emotions of when gay marriage was legalized and how much in my body I felt that. And at the time I just was identifying as an ally. And then looking back on it now, I'm like, well, this is a big explanation as to why my heart was so pulled inside of that, because some part of me knew that I was freer in that moment as well. So there was a Bermuda shorts phase, and I had, so and all of my Barbies spent a lot of time being naked. And I watched Glee because there was a gay couple. And so lots of little moments of like, oh, I could have known at any of those points, but didn't discover it until I was like 19 or 20.
And what about moving forward? So you had that realization, you spent some time looking inward, and then you move forward. What has that time been like?
It has been, I feel the most myself than I have ever felt, getting to be really out and proud about who I am, and understanding that my capacity to love and my availability to love is way bigger than I thought that it was. And, it shifts how you view the picture of the rest of your life. It goes from, the for sureness of I'll spend my life with a man to the openness of what else that could look like. And, it lets the possibility of getting pregnant on accident be a little bit safer sometimes too. But it's really been embracing the community that I'm a part of and being embraced by the community that I'm a part of too. So I don't think a day goes by without me coming out to someone or having some kind of a conversation about, normalizing same-sex relationships.
I think that's definitely a big takeaway that we're going to hear from lots of stories today. But do you want to touch on that? Just the concept that coming out doesn't happen just on one day and then it's over?
Yeah, it is a continuous process. I remember the moment that I realized that coming out was going to be something that I had to do, and how unfair it felt at first that nobody straight in my life was going to have to sit down and have a conversation about that, because that's what is assumed. And so that's a piece of that conversation that I have with people, is like, I realize that you probably don't have to do this because the assumption that people make about you being straight is true for you. But I am pretty constantly having to shift the way that people assume about myself. And yeah, it's something that happens all the time. Like you'll be at the doctor's office and they'll ask, if you have a boyfriend or a husband, and you have moments of being like, well, about that. Or with my little sisters is a big space that I do that too. They are 12 and 10, and they are hitting that phase where flirting is becoming a part of their everyday process. And so inside of those conversations, I'll be like, is there any boys or girls that you are liking at school? And they have a moment of like, you girls, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I probably would have said that too. And now here we are. So just trying to also make them aware that their options are available to them, and that their process of discovery can start as early as, they feel comfortable.
What do you think, as we start to wrap up our conversation, what do you think makes it so hard in our society to be able to explore different sexualities?
I think that there is this need to figure out what is and isn't authentic for other people. And especially being a bisexual woman, the comments from a lot of the men that I've been with have been that I'm bisexual for their attention. And the fears of some of the women that I've been with have been that they are just explorations in my life. And that when that couldn't be further from the truth, some of the biggest loves in my life have been women. And I experienced the same thing with the bisexual men in my life, that they're actually just gay and are too afraid to say that. And I think that if we just let love be exactly what it is, because that's what I kind of realized with myself, is that I was just more available to what love was for me, that it gets to be less about, what's between people's legs and more about the connection that's had. And so I feel like, a big piece of where people hesitate to let themselves be open is that they feel like they need to have an answer already, and the more that you let yourself find that out, then the more that you'll land on what is authentic and true for you. So
awesome. Thank you so much. Any questions for Ryan? Okay, well, I appreciate your showing up today. You're being authentic, sharing your story, and we'll definitely be chatting with you a little bit more.
yeah, thank you.
Of course. Zach, how are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. What's the temperature in Wichita?
It's like 90 degrees, honestly. So it's a lot hotter than I had thought it would be coming back.
It's okay. And you were just where? Tell us where you were last year.
So I took a year off in between my third and fourth year of medical school to do an MPH. I went down to Emory and worked with the CDC and a bunch of cool stuff, but I was down in Atlanta. So I was hoping to come back to a little bit cooler weather, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Not at all. What was that experience like?
Being in Atlanta, honestly, was huge for my personal development. I originally took off last year to kind of help with my application to residency, amongst other things. And so I had a lot of academic goals going in, research goals. And with COVID, everything just became very convoluted and difficult. And I ended up not accomplishing a lot of the things that I had kind of set out to do. And I couldn't have been more happy with how that turned out. I think being in a city with a gay community was really good for me and allowed me to do a lot of exploring for myself.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because you've been out for a while and very proud of who you are all the way back when you were in college. Can you talk about how you showed up and were that gay man throughout the past, through college and then through med school?
Yeah, so I came out, I went to the University of Iowa for undergrad. I was a gymnast and I came out after my freshman year and I never really felt like I was holding back. I felt like I was living my authentic life and that I had come out to my friends and my family. But I still always felt like this token, like LGBT spokesperson for most of my friends living in the Midwest. And then also as an Asian man or like a person of color, like I felt very tokenized my entire life after coming out. And that kind of continued on to medical school. And so I remember when I started medical school, my whole family, we are from like a tiny town in Nebraska. I'm adopted. And so both of my parents are from this like my mom graduated with 19 people in our class. And so I really understood, or I felt like I had a good understanding of a lot of hate or misunderstanding towards the LGBT community was more ignorance and not genuine hate. And so I came into medical school knowing that a lot of these people that I would be interacting with, my classmates, that I would be the first gay person that they would have the ability or opportunity to get to know. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself and really kind of pushed myself past what was considered healthy. I wanted to get super good grades. I wanted to excel. I was always ahead in medical school. And honestly, I was burning out very quickly. And
I literally, Zach, I literally think I remember finding you studying for step one, like the first month of medical school.
yeah, that sounds about right. Like I was so stressed and I wanted to do so well to basically prove to my classmates that, you know, gay people, we can do anything that straight people can do, or just fitting in this heteronormative role. And I felt like it also stunted a lot of my growth within the community because I was a person that was supposed to answer all these questions about the LGBTQIA plus community. And I didn't even myself feel comfortable answering some of these questions. And so going to a place like Atlanta, where I'm no longer the only gay person or one of like 5, I really felt like I could, for once, take a step back and not be that person and to really be able to ask questions. I didn't really understand, or I didn't feel comfortable, especially as a first year medical student, talking about people that identify as transgender. Like that was something that I mean, I understood that obviously they need to be treated with respect, and you know, that seemed very obvious to me. But there was a lot that I didn't understand. And I think being able to be in Atlanta and to be able to be more vulnerable and ask questions and not be kind of burdened or tasked with trying to represent my community, it was really good for me. And so I felt like, one, I was able to better understand my community, better understand the history of my community. And then 2, I was able to recognize a lot of this internalized homophobia, misogyny that I carried in myself. I always wanted to be gay, but like not that kind of gay. And that was something that I struggled with a lot being in the Midwest and growing up as a gay man in the Midwest. There's just a lot of, again, just hatred of, you know, heaven forbid we show any type of femininity or something that isn't considered generally masculine. And so again, I think Atlanta was really good in that aspect, that it really allowed me to explore who I am as a person in a safe environment, and then also just better understand the community as a whole.
How are you moving forward from that experience?
I think one of the biggest things that I took away from last year was I'm getting ready to apply to residency, and I don't want to name names, and it comes from a good place, but I remember coming out to one of my mentors as a first year medical student and them telling me, because at the time I was interested in dermatology and I still am, and I was told that I should not bring that up during my applications because that could be like nix certain programs from wanting me, and like, dermatology is an already competitive specialty and that I should keep that on the low. Just because a lot of program directors are generally older physicians that may have different views on homosexuality or the LGBT community. I think now coming back, I recognize that I think it'd be terrifying, and there is a lot of uncertainty with not matching, but I don't think it would be healthy for me to match at a program that was the environment that I would be at. And I would rather match to a specialty or not match at all than match to a program that I'm going to have to not be my authentic self for another 4 years. And so I'm kind of in the midst of that right now, coming to grips with understanding that there are unfortunately situations that my sexuality may influence whether or not I'm offered an interview or a position, and I need to be okay with that, because I would rather be able to express who I am than to get this job or opportunity at the expense of trying to live as someone that I'm not again.
Because you're going to be an amazing doctor, period, regardless of what you do. But I love that concept that you've discovered your authentic self, and that's more important. That's who you want to be, where you want to be, what you're doing is all part of that. And that is absolutely one of the most amazing parts of your story. Any other thoughts, things you want to share? I know you've really touched on the amazing growth you've had in your time while you've been here in your 4.5 years. Anything else you want to add?
I think the last thing, if this is more for like allies, I just wanted to share a quick story. I remember as a third year medical student, I was rotating and we had a 60, 70-year-old patient that was a MSM, which in medicine is man who has sex with men. And it was a very general workup. I remember I put in my orders as a medical student and I reviewed it with my attendee and I was sitting there and I remember my attendee added on like an STD panel, an HIV panel, all these things. And my patient was in a monogamous relationship, and that is what they told me. I rotated a Catholic hospital, so some of my attendees have different views than I do. But I remember my attendee looking me dead in the eye and telling me, you know, you just can't trust these kinds of people. And I was shocked because I am one of those kinds of people. And I think the difficult part about medical school is that we are able to submit feedback anonymously, but when you do that, it's very specific that attendees or that feedback is able to be traced back to you pretty easily, and our grades are subjective. And so I had an experience earlier in the year where I had a misunderstanding due to different circumstances similar, and it got traced back to me pretty quickly, and that rotation was very difficult, and I did not enjoy it. But the second time that it happened, I had my classmate and she ended up just speaking out. And to this day, like Grace Farha is an amazing student and ally, and she just called him out. And I think that is one thing that I want to emphasize is that if you're an ally, you have a lot of power because the person that is being targeted, it's really hard for that person to speak out without it coming off as them being overly sensitive or just kind of being a snowflake. And
A problem,
yeah,
an issue.
it meant a lot to me as just a student, just to see her basically rip this attendee's head off. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. And I also, yeah, it was just like very powerful to me. And if there are any allies listening, I think that's the best way that you can kind of support our community is to speak out when you see something that doesn't seem or feel right.
I think that's an amazing story that I've heard multiple times from students across many different identities, just being not able to speak and waiting, wanting, hoping that someone will step up and say something because they're very fearful in that moment. And I'm so glad that you had someone there to be there for you for that experience. Any questions for Zach? All right. Thank you, sir. Oh, do we have a question?
I do.
Teresa.
I'm curious on how your adoptive parents accepted everything when you did come out to them, being that they're a completely different background than what you are used to.
I was super fortunate, and my mom was very understanding. My sister kind of was always very outspoken. She's straight as can be, but has always been a very big ally even before I came out. So I think that made the transition a little bit easier. My dad took a little bit longer, and I think a lot of it was just the shock. I wore high heels and like when I was 5, so I'm not quite sure where the shock came from, but it definitely took some more time. And my extended family, it also still hasn't really accepted it fully. I think one of the benefits of being adopted is that I never really identified or could relate to this idea that like blood is thicker than water, because blood was never like an aspect in my life. So for me, I just ended up having to, again, choose my family, choose the people that supported who I was. And if you didn't want to be supportive and add, positivity to my life, I don't want to continue my relationship with you respectfully. And so I did cut off some family members that weren't supportive, that were hateful, but at the end of the day, I have really great friends. And again, I choose my family, and I have super great friends that I would consider closer than family. So
Thank you. All right, you're getting some love in the chat. Hang out, and we'll check back in with you in a few minutes. It's time to hear from Sarah. Are you ready?
Thank goodness. I couldn't wait any longer. I will say my favorite thing to talk about is myself. So it's
Well,
probably-
then I'm glad you're here today then.
yes,
Um,
yes.
you didn't grow up in Kansas City, you grew up in St. Louis?
Right outside St. Louis, O'Fallon, Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah.
And knew a lot of gay people? Not a lot of gay people?
No. It's actually my wife and I were actually talking about this the other day of the LGBT community was not visible to me growing up. And it's funny because we got halfway through the conversation. I said, wait a minute, my uncle is gay and married to a man. So it was there, but it was only gay men. We had the girls who lived down the street, and I was always, kind of told they were roommates. I kid you not, they were both PE teachers. Very stereotypical, and but it was never talked about. That lesbianism was never talked about, and so for me, I found it interesting, Ryan, when you said that you came out to yourself first and then everyone else, because I came out to my best friend and then the next day came out to myself. And I just happened this weekend, we went on a car ride out to St. Louis and was reading Brandi Carlile's memoir. And she made the comment in there that not everyone has a coming out story. For some people, it's a slow immersion. And that's kind of what it felt like. I had those big moments of, you're going to sit down and tell the parents and call my sister and tell my coworkers, things like that. But for me, again, looking back, it was probably a long time coming. The town where I grew up, it's a rather large town now, but it literally formed around the Catholic Church and the convent. And so I was raised Catholic. As my aunt would say, I'm genetically Catholic. It's never going anywhere. And there's many aspects I'm very grateful for the 17 years of Catholic education I had, but that definitely impacted my ability to even get to know myself. I still will be one of the first people to stand up and defend the Catholic Church's stance on homosexuality and how it's not a sin, but sex outside of marriage is. And so that's where it becomes a sin. But that really, I think, had a big impact on me and my ability to be who I was. Even now, I don't know how to say it quite right. I take advantage of my ability to hide my sexuality when I need to. I came out in 2015 and I was old, let's be honest. I am old compared to some of these young people, but I came out at 30 and I totally lost my train of thought there because I got stuck on how old I am.
Well, I'll just ask, like,
yes.
what changed at 30? Like, did something switch? Did something like?
Yeah, great question. By the time I was 30, I had been living in Lee Summit away from my family for quite some time at that point. And as corny as it sounds, yoga is what got me to finally be able to let my guard down, to let myself explore who I am. And I also had, part of my incorrect way of saying this, a really hot yoga teacher. And so that helped some too. And that's kind of what allowed me to start the process of accepting my own identity. it helped to be at that point. I was still very active in my church. I worked with the high school youth in my church, and part of what actually held me back from coming out was knowing that for me, I was going to have to break that connection. I was not comfortable working with the high school students and being out because I wasn't sure how parents would be comfortable with that. What I will say has probably made a big difference for me, because I would say the last 2 years, if not the last 6 months, I have finally allowed myself to be more visible. I'd say 2 months ago, I finally got the lesbian haircut I've always wanted. And so I'm so happy about that. And you know, it's again, I can always jump right back in the closet because I can smooth it down and make it look just like an old lady haircut and put a cap on and it's fine. But changing careers and starting to work at the med center made a surprising impact on my ability to be out, to be visible. Prior to this, I worked actually in an elementary school. My background's in elementary special education. My last 4 years there, I worked directly with parents the majority of the time. And I never, ever, ever have had a negative interaction with the parent, but I never wanted that to color their impression of me, my ability to work with their child, my ability to, I wanted them to know I had the best interest, and I didn't want their perception of me to impact that. Getting out of that field helped me because now I can have my short hair. I can wear, I mean, now that I work at home all the time, I wear my gym shorts every day, but I can wear whatever I want. And I'm so much more comfortable. Being in the suburbs, it can be hard. We have 2 little boys, and so we won't put a pride flag out. We debated it this year and talked about it, and we said the last thing we want is to draw more attention to the fact that we are a non-traditional family. That being said, we know there are other LGBTQ plus families in our neighborhood, and just we have a new neighbor down the street, had the most fabulous pride party 2 weeks ago. It has his big flag out front and all that, and we love it. But there's a safety aspect there still for us, and there are times that you know, Ryan, we were talking, I won't, there are certain places I won't wear my pride hat. I'm just not comfortable. I'm not going to run the risk. And I'm fortunate enough that I can do that when I feel uncomfortable. I wish I didn't have to.
And I think we discussed the amount of rainbow merch that is out right now. I'm pretty sure you'll blend in with basically everyone who's out and about.
But, man, that stuff is expensive. Apparently you have to be rich to like buy the cute shoes and everything.
No, you got to hit up the Target because their merch is good and it's not expensive. What is one of, I think it's really amazing, the family that you've built. How are you like, I don't know, I'm trying to like phrase the question specifically, but obviously you're being safe in terms of raising your family, but what are you teaching? What are your thoughts in terms of raising kids as a gay couple?
Absolutely. Our oldest was born in May of 2017. We were actually the night of the election in 2016, my wife sat there and wept and she said, why did we ever decide to have a child? And so there's always been that fear there. But as I look at it, I think back to my parents, and my parents, you know, we were raised with everyone's a person, everyone has value, and we may not agree with it, we may not understand it, but they taught me that we tolerate everyone. And I like to look at it as our generation was taught tolerance, and we are teaching the next generation acceptance. We work really hard with, we have 2 boys, and I remember our oldest came home one day from daycare with a ponytail and his hair's only this long anyway. but that's how they were potty training. It was the girls were getting ponytails and he wanted one. And my father-in-law, who's one of the most open and accepting people ever, got on him and said, men don't wear ponytails. And that's something we automatically shut down, because I was raised with the idea of, well, little girls don't do that. I wanted to climb trees. I still don't climb trees because I have no physical ability to, but I never could as a kid because I was told little girls don't do that. And I think that made it harder for me to come out, because I constantly had that, I think kind of like you said, Zach, there's this fear of being the stereotypical, and I don't want to be that person. It's been a journey to discover how it is a spectrum, and how, growing up, it was lesbian is butch and that's it, and it's not that at all. And even myself, from within the same day, I can go move along that spectrum where I feel more comfortable. But I really think with our kids, and what I'm really, really pleased to see within my time in K-12 education, right when I left, my wife decided to become a middle school teacher because she is crazy. And so what she has shared with her about her students is that this generation is so different, and I have so much hope for this next generation coming up, that they are so just accepting of each other's differences. And the children themselves are more comfortable with who they are, and are able to say, this is who I am. For me, part of it too was I was afraid if I came out, I couldn't change my mind. As if I because I hadn't experimented or tried anything, that there was no way to say, oh, never mind, that there was no going back. And that's obviously not how it is. I'm hoping that kids kind of can learn that there. I did see a question in the chat, which really distracted me.
No, that's really fun. And I was going to actually take a minute and throw it out to all of our panelists. Have others of you, and Sarah, if you want to lead this off, I think that's totally fine. Have others of you have that journey reconciling your gender identity, your sexual orientation, and faith. Are you still religious or faithful or spiritual? What does that look like? And again, if any of you want to jump in, that would be awesome.
So yeah, I'll go ahead. And for me, I mean, I was the good Catholic, where I in high school was seriously looking at different religious life options, what's out there. And then I went to a Catholic university. Thank goodness it was run by the Sisters of St. Joseph, who are the most liberal group of women you'll ever meet, and also the happiest nuns you'll ever meet too. And so I never felt any shame or restriction there. But for me now, when I started questioning one part of my faith, it allowed me to question all the other parts that I had always questioned but was hesitant to. My wife, I came out in August of 2015. We met in January of 2015. And so this is really a journey we've both been on together. She had been out about a year before we met. And she has never been religious. And so that influenced me as well, and made it comfortable again for me to have those doubts about my faith. So I'm not currently practicing. We are what we would consider ourselves spiritual. And actually, that's one of my biggest growth points and things I need to work on, is that if I know, and I hate to say it, it's so horrible, if I know someone's Christian, I come up to you with a huge guard up, and I just assume you're going to reject me. And so I try to lay the gay on as softly as possible and have an exit strategy. Like when I first started, I said, I don't talk about being gay. I'll casually try to mention my wife or my kid's biological mother, because she's the biological mother, but my kid's other mom type of thing. But I always just assume you're not going to like me. And so for that reason, I've also learned that once people get to know you, they don't care, for the most part. And so, as entrenched as I was in my faith and in my church and as involved I was, I mean, in college, I worked in our campus ministry, and while everyone else was out partying, we were, hanging out in the church. So it was definitely a big formative part of my life, but I have walked away from that, if you could say, because I worked with our deacon there when I came out, and he made me feel as comfortable, I think, as was possible, but I knew for me, it's just not right now.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on religion from our panelists, Ryan?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. So I would say I've been a Christian my whole life. My parents became a Christian after I came out and used that as an excuse to really let me know their thoughts and opinions about me being with women. But I would say that my faith has probably only gotten bigger, honestly, since I've really grown to love and embrace that part of myself. And it did and has continued to look like needing to meet people where they're at inside of them, not understanding how I could be, a God-fearing woman and love women as much as I do. And I lay my queerness on heavy, and I want that to be something that people just know about me up front, because I don't want it to be something that, that they feel has room for concern. And the way that I hold it, at least with my faith and my relationship with the Lord, is like, if you don't get, like, the Bible says that God is love over and over and over again. And if that's true, then I'm going to be loved for whoever I love, if it's healthy and if I'm happy and if we're, taking good care of each other. And so if someone is coming to me, from a religious place, having really intense opinions about my sexuality, then I just feel like they don't know Jesus the way that I do. Because the God that I fear is one who would only rejoice in the love that I have. But, I've interacted with some people who have really intense opinions about my sexuality who aren't religious also, but religious trauma is a hard one to heal, especially, with that being a piece of somebody staying in the closet. I think that if I had not grown up in the church, I probably wouldn't have had accessibility to discover who I was a little bit sooner, but that's just my relationship with that. So.
Awesome. Zach?
I'll just keep it. I was also raised very religious. I was raised Lutheran. My whole family is a very religious family, having grown up in a small community. So I was involved in the church since I was a tiny kid, and my whole family was too. My grandma was the treasurer. Dad did a lot of work with like the pastor, and I think that was a huge hurdle for me. And I think that was something that I tried to convey to a lot of my classmates, even was the fact that gay or LGBT members of the church, like, those are the people that honestly have prayed the most in their life. Like, I spent, after I was 12, every night, day, like, praying to be like straight. It was a lot. Like, you are raised to believe that you're going to go to hell for who you are. And I just remember going to confession every Sunday and just like wanting to be like normal. And I think when people recognize that this really wasn't a choice, that if no one wants to make their life more complicated, and I think that was something that was really eye-opening to a lot of my classmates that were raised very religiously, that I too was very religious growing up and really struggled a lot with kind of my sexuality. Even today, I'm not quite sure where I stand with my religion. I found it really great in accepting church in Kansas City. It was fantastic. I haven't really been able to find the same in Wichita. So I feel like I've kind of, I wouldn't say strayed from my faith. It's just been on a hold. But yeah, religion is still something that I'm working with now. And I think that's something I have to be okay with, that, this is a process and I'm still learning and I'm trying to figure out where I stand with this, but it's okay. So.
Martin.
Yeah, so what to say? One of the blessings in my life was that when I came out, I largely came out within a group of lesbian Catholic women. And they went out to me. It took them a while to come out to me, but they were all convinced that I was gay. And we'll talk a bit more about that. But and so I came out in the church. Like that was, and not to say priests that all priests were helpful, but some priests were very helpful to me. I remember going to confession and being told to forgive myself. And then I joined Dignity, which is the Catholic crowd. And those were, that was when I went away to university, and they were mostly older fellas. Many of them were ex-religious. Many had lost their, had been defrocked due to their sexual orientation. But for us, attending Mass was an act of resistance. And so it was a political thing to go to Mass. And it was very powerful as a 22-year-old man, to have these, pillars of the community, fellows around me, as I would go to Mass. And I don't go to Mass much anymore, almost never. But I do remember like that strong message that it was really important, that to be seen. And I'm not telling anyone to do that. I'm just saying, from my experience, that was like a really powerful political behavior. And it was reinforced by very lucky opportunities I had to listen to Catholic priest scholars who would talk about these things, in very theological terms. And so, yeah, I really lucked out, I think, in that, I had that very powerful experience early on.
Very cool. And I got the go ahead.
1982.
Oh my. Well, I got the go ahead. We're going to go ahead and let you keep talking because you're already on the screen. And I think this completely relates to your story as well as some of the other things we've already heard. But big shout out, congratulations, finishing your doctorate of occupational therapy. Just in time to wrap it up and retire?
Hopefully. One of the things is that I've been very inspired listening to folks tonight, and I'm old. And
no.
And one of the things I was going to talk a bit about was coming out more than once.
Yes.
But instead, I think I'll just start with identity. So I was that kid that was labeled, gay. And I thought, all gay men had sex with women because, I lived in a small rural town and I was clearly labeled, gay. And so I was just like, oh, this is life, And then when I came out, I received all of these negative feedback about particularly, dating women, sleeping with women. And so it got to the point where I kind of did that on the down low, because if my friends knew, it would be like a deal. And so this is this curious thing of bisexual erasure. And so then people would challenge me. I remember I was counseling in the Gay Alliance Towards Equality at age 22, as if I knew what I was doing. And I remember being told, well, you're not really gay enough to be counseling there. And this was in spite of the fact that the majority of phone calls I took were from married men who were trying to resolve these issues in their lives. And that amused me. I remember having a sense of humor about this guy. I'm not sure that you're bi enough to have this conversation with someone. So yeah, this thing of identity. And I just really, really respect young people thinking about identity. I just think the whole identity game has been upped so rapidly over the last decade. And I just have this huge respect for people thinking more clearly about gender, thinking more clearly about orientation, thinking more clearly about queering life, about diversity and inclusion. And so, yeah, just big shout out that way.
Now
shout out is to my parents, because even though I was this very queer kid, my mom was very butch. And so my brothers, I come from a family of 10 kids, and my brothers used to come to my mother and father on a regular basis and say, make him stop. Make him stop. Make him stop talking like that, making him stop dressing like that. They had all these great ideas about my life. And my mother would look at them and she would just go, oh my God, he is not going to stop, okay. And I never even thought that was unusual. Like, I think literally I was in my 50s when I reflected back and thought, wow, my mom was amazing. In the 1960s, to be telling my brothers to shut up. And so I just wanted, because identity really is such a powerful issue. And of course, we bring so much from our childhood. And so, yeah, I have these very fond memories. Even my father did this very strange thing one day. I have a very negative relationship with my father, unfortunately, but which improved over time. But for my 14th birthday, he gave me bubble bath. And I was completely like, whoa, you cannot give me that gift. And he's like, why not? And I said, because my brothers got cattle, I need to get what my brothers got. And he was like, okay. He was very solemn about it. And we worked out this deal where I didn't have to tell people I got bubble bath, but I could, like, own some livestock. That was important. And so, like, even my dad, who was struggling, in lots of areas of his own life, was probably very depressed. And then he did this other funny thing, which was that my sister hated working in the house. My sisters typically ran the house, and my two oldest sisters had gone off to college and university. And my father asked me, he said, your sister hates working in the kitchen, and you're, a good cook. Like, would you take over the kitchen? My mother hated cooking. She never cooked. And so, and the only thing that offended me about that was I remember I didn't want them to tell people, like, I'm okay cooking for like 12 people, but I do not want you to tell anybody. So coming out for me was a curious thing because I was very religious. I was raised to believe that being a priest was the appropriate place for someone like me. And so I wasn't coming out because I was going to enter the priesthood and it was unnecessary. And so then I met these lesbian women and they all went like, oh God, you're gay. Like, I went, oh, okay. And it took me a while. I think I was dating some of them, and then they would like let me off gently by saying, no, really, I prefer women. And I'd be like, not again. I was something in my life. So yeah.
But then this was before you moved to the other side of Canada, right?
Well, it was my coming out kind of coincided with me changing cities to go to university. And
that's when you realized you were biased against French-speaking people.
Oh, you're talking about when I was 17 and I was traveling across the country. I was in the Canadian Youth Service. We won't talk about my sexual experiences there. That was like.
But ultimately, your traveling, your education, ending back in your small town, really ended up benefiting your community.
Yes. So what I was going to talk about was coming out again twice. So the first time I came out, and then I fell in love with my wife quite early in my 20s. We had a lot to resolve because we had to figure out how to do this thing. And so I was out well before I got married. I got married in my late 20s. And we adopted shortly thereafter and raised children. And one of the funny things that happened was that I thought I was out, and slowly and surely I became more and more closeted. And then we moved to a small town to practice up here in Peace River. And I just came up against such homophobic behavior amongst colleagues that I just was not going to be out. My wife was seriously afraid for us. Like, she was like, it's not safe. Like, you can't come out. And so then I became familiar with John Pachankas's work at Yale. around the ESTEAM program. And I might be running out of time, Ryan, so you can just tell me whenever I need to shut up.
You're good.
And I was so excited by the ESTEAM program, and what Pachankas talked about in this lecture was the negative health outcomes of the closet. And so I looked at that and I went, and that was when I was like, I think I'm back in the closet. I don't know how this has happened to me, but of course my family and people I love knew, but like really I wasn't out of work. And I was facing a lot I work in addictions and mental health. I was facing a lot of homophobia in the workplace. And after I heard that, I was just like, you're old, Martin, you have to get out of the closet because, it's your job to be a better role model than just, just doing what's comfortable because, you're a married man and, you've raised your children and blah, blah, blah. And so I came out again. And what that has resulted in is that a couple of very important projects as I prepare for retirement, one of which is working with the local Pride group to develop quality indicators for access to healthcare. And someday I would like to talk more about that, but we did design a very good set of quality indicators and quite a clever culturally sensitive sort of method of assessing an organization's, and we didn't develop that, sorry, we borrowed and applied it to the quality indicators, a way of measuring from invisible to culture of inclusion. And the second project is working on peer support. Particularly, I'm very focused on the fact that there are very high rates of suicide, highest rates next to trans folks, unfortunately have the highest rates. But next to that, bisexual women who are married to men and bisexual men who are not married to women. Being married to a woman is protected most of the time. And so we're doing this project around peer supports, around developing peer supports. I'm thinking about ways that we might be able in a rural area to provide support to particularly these very closeted sorts of folks who may be struggling. And just to shut up for Pachankas, because the work he's been doing has been in Eastern Europe. And so he's been using like online methods of engaging with folks to provide this. It's for people who know, it's the CBT, what is that called? Something protocol, universal protocol. It's not, I've forgotten the right words for it, but it's an intervention, but he's adapted it as an anti-stigma intervention called the ESTEAM program. And so we're attempting to bring that to this rural community.
Awesome. Thank you for all you're doing up there in rural English-speaking Canada. Very cool. Last but certainly not least, because our final panelist could probably fill volumes. Dr. Tori Gleason, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Ryan?
Doing well. So excited to have met you over the past couple of months and quickly become such a huge advocate for everything we're doing, especially as someone who lives, well, Goodland, Kansas has the best Pizza Hut that I know of, but other than that, Western Kansas is how, why don't we talk about Western Kansas and being a trans person?
Sure. I knew I was different at the age of 5. I grew up in Dodge City, Kansas in the 80s previous to internet. And so I had no sense of community. Basically the way I had the vocabulary that came later, but the way I kind of explain it to people is that my hardware doesn't match my software. And that's kind of where we're at. And I was pissed. My hardware is not where I need it to be. And so, it's been that journey for a lifetime of trying to, because it's not congruent. And how do I become congruent? How do I find, how do I find that connection and acceptance, self-acceptance? I've struggled with that. Zach's story really resonated with me. And there was a lot of self-hatred, I'm not going to lie, and just coming to terms with, gender identity and then the sexual orientation aspect of who I am. So, and growing up in Dodge and then going to K-State and undergrad, off to chiropractic college in Iowa and Davenport, Iowa, and then settling back in Goodland, Kansas and Northwest Kansas, it's been a struggle, because there's never been a sense of community. There's never been that sense of belonging. And, again, there's that self-rejection as well, as we talked about with faith. And I shared that in the chat because I didn't want to overtake the entire, Zoom. But, it's always been that, genie aspect of faith, where just praying to God every night that please just fix me, just make me whole, make me right. And, I remember going to church, to the Catholic church early in the morning, butt crack of dawn with my dad. And then after that, following it up with what seemed like an all-day service with my mom at the First Southern Baptist Church. And so that was fun. That was that, and so that was that struggle. And so trying to find who I am and how I am in this path. And then, understanding, as I tried to reach out for access to care in the early 90s and mid 90s, and then being denied access for behavioral health, being denied access for gender affirming hormone therapy. I learned the gatekeeping aspects of being trans very early. And that's why I advocate so hard for those trans kids out there, those non-binary kids out there that just need care. They need to be taken care of, because I don't want any kid to walk through the path that I did, because it was miserable. That said, I guess my journey is here so I can help them. And so here I am today, and I made it. I survived. I love school. I love being a nerd. I'm very proud of that aspect. But, it's hard because, being trans, I'm not the pretty kind of trans. There's no hope for me on an OnlyFans page. I just want you all to know, I'm not that kind of cute trans. I'm that oh, sweet Jesus. Here she is again. And so I know, Geraldine, I'm sorry. And so, and so it's just, I am who I am. And I just show up, and my authentic journey isn't really so much about me as it's about those kids. It's giving kids permission to be who they are, giving permission to those kids growing up. And just in our little tiny school here, 3A school, seeing the queer, trans, and non-binary kids we have in Goodland, Kansas, and feeling like they can be who they are, and not not being ashamed of that. I just have so much pride for those kids that they can just be who they are. And just being able to be that lighthouse to keep them from crashing on the shoreline, like I did as a kid, and being that mentor to serve them, to help them, to be there for them in every and any aspect. And so, and that's a big part of my journey in here in Western Kansas.
Tori, when were you able to become Tori?
So my mom named me Tori when I was born. My dad was not too particularly fond of that name. I guess he thought if my lunch money was going to ever make it past the bus stop, it had to be changed to a other name. And so I've always been Tori Gleason. And then it became, I'll dead my name myself because it doesn't bother me. I was Patrick Torrance Gleason, but the T was always abbreviated. The T was always silent. And so it would take me 3 decades before the T was no longer silent, and I could just be who I am. And it took me a long time to find my voice. It took me a long time to find that self-love of appreciation that I am who I am, beautifully made. And it took a long time. And there are those moments, as Zach talked, that struggle of just oh man, I always say I'm the glitch from Wreck-It Ralph. That's who I am, and so that struggle is always there. And so I get it. And being able to have those conversations with those older trans people, as well as our younger generation of trans and non-binary people.
But where did it start to, because we've had this conversation, and you've shared since you were younger, you always felt different. Even when you were going to chiropractic school, your goal was to end up in Trinidad because you knew they had gender affirming care there.
Absolutely.
You were married, you had children. What was it that finally allowed you to be authentically you?
I guess I got permission from my 9-year-old daughter. And here's the crazy thing And, you know, I came out to my 9-year-old daughter and basically said, here's the thing, like, I have been trans, I know who I am, but I can't be me because that means I can't spend as much time as you. I might lose my business. I might lose my time with you, my marriage, my everything that I thought was important, I might lose. And she looked at me at 9, she's my future social worker, and said, how can you ask me to be brave and courageous if you can't do the same? How can you ask me to do these things, but you can't live it yourself? And so after that, I'm like, screw it. I thought I missed my window of opportunity. And so my 9-year-old speaking truth into me as an adult is what it took just to be me. And so, and who I adore to this day. And now I have a very proud 13-year-old daughter that's very queer, very happy, going to dances with her girlfriends and just living her best life. And I couldn't be more proud of who she is. But she saved me. She basically called me out, and I finally said enough is enough, and this is who I am. And she will always be my biggest supporter. And I often say that I need her more than she needs me. And that my 13-year-old daughter now has encouraged me that the beauty I have in the inside, yeah, I don't have passing privilege and my voice doesn't, sound like it should. And I'm not one of those that could ever be stealth, but at the same time, that doesn't matter. It's that authenticity and that personal journey and walk and loving your neighbor and teaching other people that, we're all different, that we can just love each other. And so that permission came from my 9-year-old daughter, and that's where that came from.
Very cool. Any questions for Tori? Thank you for sharing. Thank you everyone for sharing your stories, for sharing your truth, for showing up today. I have a couple of questions for all of our panelists. I'm going to start with one that came in the chat. And again, please feel free to throw other questions in the chat. And this was a while back, so I forget who asked this. I apologize. But advice for how to be supportive, but not intrusive as allies. How do you know when someone is being supportive? Any thoughts? I'm pretty sure Ryan has also changed costumes 3 times during
Listen,
our...
it's gotten cold. It's gotten really cold, and then it was really warm, and then it was really cold again. So let's not shame me for trying to honor my experience here.
There is no shame in a costume change on a Pride chat. Costume changes are welcome. So any thoughts on advice to our allies about how to be supportive but not intrusive?
Yeah, I actually have something. Don't shame people for when they want their arms to be warm. No, but in all seriousness, I would say be more willing to show up and be wrong than you are afraid to show up and be wrong. Because I feel like if you allow yourself this space, and like we as a community get to know that you're willing to stand next to us, even if you don't have all the right words, or you are still learning how to be inside of that community as an ally. It's more important to me, at least, that I know that I have you with me and you're going to be imperfect inside of that, than feel like you're going to wait to be perfect to show up and then I am left inside of it all alone.
Other thoughts?
I would say for me, it's kind of in a sense of normalizing things. What means so much to me is when I have a colleague, a coworker, just say, so how are your kids doing? How's your wife? And it's no different than asking anyone else. It makes me so much more comfortable. The other thing that really, really means a lot to me, and it seems so silly, but when I get an email from somebody and their pronouns are in their signature, it lets me know that you are comfortable with me. You are comfortable with our community. For me, I was always kind of like, well, my pronouns are obvious. Why would I put that there? And then I realized how it's not for me. It's for the person I'm sending my email to know I'm accepting of whoever you are. And then one other thing, we have my yoga studio here. They do a couples yoga, and they put in their email LGBTQ plus community members welcome to this couples yoga, which I always see all the time, like everyone's welcome, all types of couples, but to have it actually spelled out, let me know I could show up and there was not going to be any awkwardness if I showed up with my wife there. And so it's just little bitty things like that have made such a difference to me.
Other thoughts?
One of the things that I think particularly happens in rural areas is there's a very strong don't ask, don't tell mentality. And so I will listen to healthcare professionals who go, well, I don't want to, and they have a litany of reasons why they wouldn't open up that conversation. And I think that don't ask, don't tell, it isn't working. And particularly, I really do have a concern for youth, that young folks have safe spaces. So two things: don't get enough information so that you actually can be competent, and don't pretend to be competent when you're not. And do not think it is enough not to say the judgmental thing. You actually have to say the welcoming thing.
Zach?
Yeah, I like kind of what Ryan had said earlier about showing up. I think it's super important that people aren't waiting until they feel like they're ready, because honestly, you're never going to be 100% ready. And coming from someone within the community, I still have a lot to learn. And I think it's important that you understand that you are going to say things that may be insensitive, that aren't okay. And you need to be able to take that criticism and adjust your behavior, your speech. You don't get to decide whether or not you offended someone. I think last year, one of the big takeaways from the Black Lives Matter protests that I really liked, or one of the things that was just kept on coming up, was elevate Black voices. And I think that's kind of the same thing with the LGBT community, is elevate the voices of people within the community. Those are people that I've experienced. You don't get to negate someone's experiences, that is theirs, and to really just kind of support where you can. And again, speak out when you feel comfortable, but also don't be afraid to be critiqued. And if you are critiqued, it's not a personal attack onto you. It's just, that's something that you should look to try to get better. And I again, like I said, I'm part of the community. I've said some things that are not okay, and I've learned, and I will continue to learn. So.
Tori?
I think being an advocate and an ally, I think standing in for those microaggressions, standing in and correcting people, because sometimes I get tired of having to correct, or worse yet, I don't say anything. It's exhausting, especially in rural. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people in my rural community ask me about, have you had the surgery? They're more concerned with what's in my pants than I am. And, I've had patients, my own patients, have asked me, very vulnerable, very boundaries are just, when all of a sudden when you're trans and it's about gender identity, boundaries are out the window. And so what I would say is, if you see it, please call it out, because it's exhausting mentally to always have to be the one, if it's being dead named or pronouns, for me, I'm like, whatever. But it's that stuff. It's very, very hard to hear on a regular basis in rural America. So if you observe that, call it out. I hate having to answer that question with, it's none of your business. And it's really not, but it happens frequently.
Thank you all. My next question is really, because we have so many future and current healthcare providers, what is your biggest hope for the future of healthcare for LGBTQ people? What can our future providers do to provide excellent care for our community? I'm going to start with Martin.
I was looking for something. Yeah, so, oh my God. So now
Put you on the spot, sorry.
To go. Where could we start? So I was trying to find this tool that I was going to put in there from the municipalities here on inclusive government. But where can you start? You can start by doing a self-assessment, making a judgment about where you're at, and then just don't try to take the first, don't try to take all the steps at once. Take first step. So if in your way of doing clinical practice, like everything is invisible to you, like you don't ever imagine. Like, for example, we had people here when they went in and asked for HIV testing, their primary care doctor said, no, you don't need that. Okay. People don't ask if they don't need it. Okay, just organize the stupid testing. But so we have that flow sort of where things are just invisible. Maybe the first step is just awareness. Let's think about how like the organizations can be generally more aware and build it up until you build that culture of inclusion and that whole array of services that really are inclusive.
Awesome. Ryan, thoughts?
Yeah, so my thought on that is a little bit tailored to what I do for KU. So I'm a clinical researcher for the radiation oncology department. And something that I have done a lot of research inside of and am planning to continue is the way that our patients who are transgender don't get annual cancer screenings because they don't identify with their prostate or their chest, you know, so they're not getting those annual cancer screenings, and that can end up being really detrimental to their health. Because if you don't identify with your breast, the likelihood that you're going to go to an office where that's what they're going to focus their attention on, and they're probably not going to be sensitive to the way that they refer to that part of your body, or making sure that they are using your correct pronouns, or are checking in with your own safety and how you feel being in that office, is so like vital to your patients being able to carry on with healthy lives. And so I feel like if we could do more to make sure that those actual offices, you know, are safe spaces to where like the community can be aware that we have, you know, doctors' offices that are safe and that our health system is a place of inclusion, then I think we would see better prognoses with a lot of our patients. Because even, you know, the other day I was getting my birth control implant removed from my arm, and my nurse practitioner was like, well, just make sure he wears a condom, you know, like assuming that I'm having sex with a man and that pregnancy is something that could happen for me. And I just kind of was like, yeah, like if I was having sex with men, like that would be something that I had to worry about, you know. But, you know, so I just, and luckily, like it didn't actually do anything to my health in that moment, but there are times where it really can. So awareness goes a long way.
Awesome. Anyone else have thoughts?
I do. I always have a thought, and I always share it. So, and it's rambling. But from the patient side, my only involvement in anything medical is patient is read the chart before you walk in the room. I hate being asked the birth control question, and make sure it's on your intake form. You know, how do you identify? I would love to start seeing the question of pronouns being asked, because that's a change I've seen just in the last few years, is being asked, how do you identify? And when the doctor or the nurse walks in the room, especially when it's my primary care, my dentist, somebody I've seen multiple times, and they say, so how's your wife? I don't have to worry about broaching that subject. I don't have to worry, because they'll say, oh, are you, there's so many times where I have to just drop, well, my wife, or they mention, oh, well, your husband, it says you're married. What's your husband do? Well, my wife. And it puts, you know, me on I'm an anxious person. So if anything you can do to lower that is so grateful. So just look at the chart before you walk in.
Tori.
You know, I guess that 10,000 foot view perspective, I think getting a patient advisory committee from the community out there, those that are in the community, I think is important. A lot of clinics and hospitals in smaller rural areas don't even have a DEI committee. I think forming that would be one of the first things they could do, because then they can start making sure that unconscious bias is learned from onboarding process from employees. You know, you're seeing more like with the curriculum at Tulane and other schools that are doing a good job. Harvard just had a $1.5 million grant to improve their sex and gender minority curriculum. I think the harm that I've had has come more from front office and back office staff than any clinical staff I've ever had. And oftentimes they get a one-time little educational webinar, And so that continual education of that front office, because if you think about it, they spend twice as much time with the front office and back office staff as they do the clinical provider, making sure that they have that acumen and skill set that's needed to take care of patients and be, so their inclusion and affirmative in our care.
All right. Our last question of the day, and again, I think it's so important. Thank you for taking the time to share your stories. What makes our community visible is showing up, being authentic, and taking the time to share your stories so that people can know that we exist. There are times where some of us can be invisible, some of us can't be invisible, or not, trying to hide who we are or kind of stay in the shadows. But we want to be bright, we want to be colorful, we want to be out there, we want to be safe. And sharing our stories is how we do that. But my last question for you today is, what is the next thing that will continue to move our community forward? What is it within our society that we need to be doing to continue to move our community forward, all aspects of our community? Anyone want to volunteer to go first? Martin, wrap us up.
So first of all, I just think lateral, what's the word? the general sort of within community negative stuff that happens. What is this called? Is it lateral violence or lateral aggressions? Yeah, just checking ourselves on that, and it's this challenge because there's a lot of very bigoted LGBTQ folks, and and it's tough to be kind of brave in that situation as well. So just that, and just focusing on body positivity and sex positivity, and kind of queering the whole conversational space in any way that we can, and even when we're old and uncomfortable, just chill.
I don't know if anyone else agrees, but I just want to bottle Martin's laugh and keep it, so I can listen to it all the time. It is just such a beautiful sound. So thank you for sharing your voice and your laugh with us today, friend. Ryan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think that something that we could really make sure to do is push for inclusion to be important on more than just Pride Month. There are a lot of companies who are really proud to wave that white flag for, a couple of weeks out of the year. And I think that the more that we can push for that to be a part of every day, then the closer that we can get to normalizing what it is to be a part of this community. I know that coming out is something that is, at least for me, was incredibly infuriating, that that was going to be something that I was going to have to do. And I think that the closer that we get to, future generations not having to do that, is to continue to push for this to be inside of the conversation. So.
Awesome. Thank you for being here today, sharing your story. Zach?
Yeah, I think, and Martin kind of talked about it a little bit, but talking about intersectionality within our own community, we have a lot of issues that I think we need to discuss as a community too, coming forward towards BIPOC and even women. I would agree. I think it was Sarah that had previously mentioned, but when most people think of the LGBT community, most people think of gay men. A lot of the times women are just forgotten. And I saw this interesting podcast that kind of talked about how even within the LGBT community, it is all through the male gaze. It talked about how when you, again, like what we had talked about previously, when a guy comes out as bi, they're assumed to be gay because he wants a man. And when a woman comes out as bi, it's again, she's probably just seeking men's approval, and it's again ending with wanting a man. And so I think kind of addressing issues within our own community is important, so that we do kind of make these big pushes as a community, we can do so more cohesive and together, and we're all more on board. And then briefly talking about the body positivity movement, especially within gay men, I think that's a huge issue that it's not like talked about enough as well. So
I'm gonna bobblehead my head off. Yes, thank you so much. And to your point, I see several beautiful bisexual people here today. So thank you for being here. Tori?
I think moving into advocacy is important. When we see these LGBTQ bills around the country, too often we've struggled on policy to get people to actually write written testimony or actually testify in person. And so what I would ask you is that you encourage others around you, if you go with that rule of 7, if you will, get people to testify. We need more power in that because, you know, we're looking at almost 200 bills we had just this last legislative session around the country, and a majority of them were anti-trans bills. And so I beg of you to speak out, you know, because those are the miserable minority. They usually don't have a voice. And so I'm asking you to be the voice for them. And so step up, encourage your family care providers. If you are the family care provider, reach out and connect and try and speak up for those that don't have a voice.
Awesome. Thank you, friend. Sarah, do you want to bring us home?
I mean, yeah, come on over. The kids are gone, so we might as well come over here and party. No, I think I don't have a good answer. And so I think just like we said, show up. Even today, I was just talking to 2 of my colleagues about doing this, and we got into a great conversation about what a U-Haul lesbian is and what the lesbian battle axe flag is. And so it's and we ended up having a great conversation. And I think that's part of it, like you said, being visible. And I think really, truly working with kids and just teaching them to accept who they are and accept everyone where they are. And then again, always self-care. I mean, taking care of each of ourselves is going to help make the community stronger.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Larry Long for the amazing links that he's putting in the chat. This will be up on the DEI page under Pride Month, and the chat will be part of that. So lots of great resources there. We've been collecting all of your names because we're giving away books at all of our events. So I'm going to turn it over to Ellie. The Queen's English is a book written by Chloe Davis, and is a collection of words and colloquial phrases used by the LGBTQIA community. We are bringing her to campus virtually at the end of the month, and we're giving out books ahead of time. So Ellie has the wheel of names, and we'll see. We've got 3 books to give out.
Yep, 3 books. Okay, I should have everyone loaded in there.
All right.
So let's see who is our first winner.
Larry, congratulations. All right,
Okay,
2
next
more.
winner.
2 more chances. Who is it going to be?
Dale.
It's Dale. Awesome.
Congratulations, Dale. And final winner.
While we're spinning, don't forget, we have one more event this week. We have a campus drag show, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the HEB courtyard on Friday. And Jen Dolson, if you're there, I'll give you your book in person. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you again to everyone who participated today. Thank you to our Office of Diversity Inclusion for giving us the space to share our stories. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've got more events coming up. I hope to see people in person at the drag show on Friday. It is 5:30. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Thank you for being here with us today.